The wind whispered low through the quiet corridors of the K9 facility as Ethan Carter stepped inside for the first time. He paused at the edge of a kennel where a German shepherd lay curled in the shadows, unmoving eyes amber and dulled. This was Max, once the pride of the department, now a ghost. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't call out or offer a hand like the others had. He just stood, posture calm, hands still. Across the chain-link barrier, Max raised his head a fraction. The air was heavy with old pain, thick with the scent of bleached sawdust, and something unspoken. "He hasn't eaten in 4 days," said Officer Martinez from behind, clipboard in hand. "Doesn't respond to toys. Barely reacts to commands." "You sure about this?" Ethan pulled out a weathered photograph. Him and his father both in uniform smiling beside a cruiser. Trust, Ethan said, isn't earned with commands. It's built in silence, in waiting. That night, after the lights dimmed and the others went home, Ethan returned, not with treats, but with a folding chair and a worn paperback of Mice and Men. He set the chair 10 feet from the kennel and began reading aloud. His voice was calm, unforced. Max didn't move, but his ears flicked. Every night Ethan came back. Sometimes he read. Sometimes he just sat, breathing softly, matching Max's stillness. No commands, no expectations. By the 5th night, Max had shifted, just inches but closer to the fence. On the 6th, Captain Sullivan found Ethan asleep, in the chair book open in his lap. Max lay near the fence, too closer than he'd let anyone come, since Morrison died in his arms. "You're not required to be here," Carter Sullivan said softly, not unkindly. "I know," he replied, "but he needs someone who won't walk away." That evening, something changed. Ethan placed his father's badge beside the kennel, polished to a dull gleam. "See you tomorrow, partner," he whispered. And Max, silent, wounded Max, moved just enough for his tail to twitch once across the floor. It was the first movement of trust, not a leap, just a flick. But it was everything. At sunrise, the training yard shimmered with dew. Ethan stood at the edge with Max, who now followed him willingly, though still cautious, like stepping into a dream, too fragile to trust. Martinez observed with narrowed eyes, the clipboard once filled with warnings, now blank waiting. "This is a slow dog," another officer muttered. "No drive left." But Ethan didn't rush. He walked the path slowly, letting Max sniff each corner, every scent, a story. The bond was new, fragile as wet paper, but real. Where others had barked commands, Ethan offered patience. They didn't attempt obedience drills. Not yet. Instead, Ethan read in the open yard, sunlight warming his back, while Max lay nearby, ears twitching with every voice inflection. When Martinez brought fresh food, Max didn't flinch anymore. He didn't eat either. But he watched. It was enough. One night, Ethan brought a tennis ball not to throw, but just to place it down beside him. He didn't look at Max, didn't say a word. And after nearly 20 minutes, the dog slowly, cautiously walked over. He touched his nose to the ball, then looked at Ethan. Not defiant, not playful, curious. The next night, Max nudged the ball to Ethan's shoe. The following evening, he rested his head against Ethan's boot. Each gesture was small, a whisper against the roar of protocol. But it rewrote something deeper than training. It rewrote grief. Captain Sullivan watched from the shadows of the corridor, arms crossed, saying nothing. But she stayed longer each night, and she never interrupted. On the 10th evening, Ethan didn't read. He just sat in silence. Max lay beside him, head on his paws. The air was still. Sometimes Ethan murmured the most broken parts fit together best. Max didn't wag, didn't move, but he stayed. And that was enough to begin. 6 weeks later, the K9 training yard buzzed with quiet tension. Ethan stood beside Max at the starting line of the obstacle course, Around them, officers whispered, "That dog shouldn't even be here. He's going to freeze." But Ethan heard none of it. His eyes were only on Max. The sun cast long lines over the jumps ramps and tunnels ahead, each one a test not just of obedience but of something deeper, something Max had been told he'd lost. Martinez raised her clipboard. "Basic obedience. Off-leash. You have 30 minutes. Max sat still, not rigid, not trembling, just ready. Ethan knelt beside him, pulled his father's badge from his pocket, and let the medal rest in his palm. "No pressure," he whispered. "Just you and me." He nodded. "Forward." Max hesitated, not out of defiance, but memory. Ethan could see it in the slight lift of his ears, the tension in his legs, the ghosts of old commands, old pain. 3 seconds passed. Then Max moved. They approached a 6-foot wall. Previous handlers had barked at Max here, used force corrections. Ethan didn't. He placed his hand on the wood. Together he said, voice barely above a breath. Max leapt, not perfectly, but with trust. The tunnel came next. Then, the platform. Max moved not from command, but from connection. From a rhythm born of evenings spent in silence, of bedtime novels, of quiet waiting. Halfway through, a loud crash startled the yard, a maintenance cart tipping near the fence. Max froze, mid-step, eyes wide, breath sharp. The trauma surged back like a wave, but Ethan didn't grab him, didn't yell. Instead, he sat on the ground, pulled out the badge again, and said gently, "It's okay to be scared." He patted the earth beside him. Being brave means facing it, with someone you trust. Max looked at him, eyes softening. Then he moved slow and deliberate, and pressed himself into Ethan's side. The entire yard fell silent. They finished the course 2 minutes over the limit, with messy form and creative detours. But they finished, and they finished together. Captain Sullivan waited at the end of the course, arms crossed. Martinez reviewed her notes, lips pressed into a tight line. Technically, Sullivan began, "You failed." Ethan stood tall beside Max, who panted softly, eyes alert, but calm. The crowd of officers shifted uncomfortably, waiting for the reprimand. "You missed several standard cues," Sullivan continued. "Non-regulation body language, improvised positioning." Then she looked down at Max. "But your stress response." "Perfect. Human canine bond indicators." She held up Martinez's clipboard. "Strongest I've seen in 15 years. Martinez gave Ethan a nod. "We're rewriting some protocols, but keep the Steinbeck readings between us." Ethan smiled, unable to help it. Max leaned into his leg, the subtle weight of trust. That night, under the soft light of the K9 facility, they opened a new book, Call of the Wild. Max's head rested on Ethan's knee as the officer read aloud, his voice smooth, steady. The words were for both of them now, one learning how to lead the other, learning how to follow again. Their win wasn't about time or precision. It was about something deeper. Max was no longer a ghost dog. He was a partner. And for the first time, Ethan believed they were ready for the real world, with its sirens and unknowns and dangers far louder than the crash of a cart. As he read, Max didn't sleep. He listened. The snow fell in thick silence that December night, blanketing the suburban streets in a hush. Red and blue lights painted long streaks across the frosted pavement as Ethan and Max stepped out of the cruiser. The cold bit deep, but urgency burned hotter. A child was missing. 7-year-old Sarah Mitchell had vanished from her bedroom sometime after midnight. No signs of forced entry. A window open. No footprints. Just absence and the rising panic of parents huddled on the porch. Ethan knelt in the snow, unzipping a small evidence bag. Inside was a worn stuffed rabbit. Her favorite said, Detective Anderson, voice tight against the cold. Ethan offered it to Max. This is different from training, he whispered. This is real. Max inhaled deeply. His nose twitched. Then he moved. They slipped through backyards and frozen parks, Max, leading with a quiet urgency. No barking, no hesitation, just instinct and trust. The trail led to Riverside Park, long abandoned for the season. Beneath the skeleton of the old jungle gym, Max stopped, head-low posture shifting from tracking to alert. She's close, Ethan radioed, hand resting on Max's back. Then the dog bolted, swift but silent, toward a maintenance shed, half covered in snow. Ethan followed, heart pounding. The padlock was untouched, but the back window had frost scraped from the glass. He peered inside. "Sarah," he called softly. "It's the police. You're safe." A faint whimper answered. Inside, curled in a corner, shivering in her pink pajamas, was Sarah Mitchell. "I got scared," she whispered as Ethan helped her through the window. "So I hid." Max, normally wary of strangers, stepped forward. Gently, he lay beside her, his warm body pressed against hers, like a living blanket. He didn't move until the paramedics arrived. Later, as the snow resumed its quiet descent, Ethan stood with Sullivan at the station. She looked over the report. "Time to recovery, 17 minutes. Fastest we've ever had is 43, she said. "You let the dog lead." Ethan nodded. "Sometimes instinct matters more than grid patterns." She studied him a moment. "Think he can handle crowds?" Not before, Ethan admitted. "But now we're learning. Together." By spring, Ethan and Max were no longer just an oddity. They were a conversation. Their success with Sarah Mitchell had sent ripples through the department, unsettling old-school handlers and sparking quiet debates in meeting rooms. Some called Ethan reckless. Others called him revolutionary. Numbers spoke louder than opinions. 6 missing persons recovered, 4 drug busts, and 0 complaints. Not a single civilian injured. Not a single misstep in the field. And Max calm, steady, sharp as ever. But not everyone applauded. Handler Richard Peterson, 20 years in K9, spoke up at a monthly review. "He treats the dog like a pet, not a tool. He's undermining decades of discipline." Captain Sullivan countered with facts. K9 injury rates are down 40%. Handler burnout is dropping. We're seeing better retention. That's not rebellion, it's progress. Still, the tension simmered beneath the surface. Then came the Jackson Avenue call, a domestic disturbance gone wrong. An armed man had barricaded himself inside with his elderly mother. The air was thick with threat. Tradition said send the dog in hard. Ethan didn't. Instead, he positioned Max at the back door, calm and visible. Through the kitchen window, the suspect spotted him. "Your dog," he murmured over the phone. "He looks like Rex." "My old dog." Ethan seized the thread. "His name's Max. He's been through a lot." "So have I. Maybe we can talk." 2 hours later, the man surrendered. No force, no injury, just trust and a dog who didn't growl. Afterward, Chief Roberts called Ethan into his office. The chief's desk was stacked with reports divided like a line in the sand. "Half my staff thinks you're a genius," Roberts said. "The other half thinks you're a threat." Ethan stood still, Max seated at his side like a statue carved from purpose. "We're not trying to change the world, Sir," Ethan said. "We're just showing it doesn't always need a leash." Roberts was quiet for a long moment. Then he tapped a folder. "You're being assigned to the Interstate Task Force. Major operation. Big risks." He stood. "But remember this, Carter. Not everyone wants change." Max's ears flicked. Ethan nodded. "Understood." The Interstate Task Force briefing room buzzed with tension. Surveillance photos wallpapered the walls. Red string connected faces, warehouses, border routes. The target, the Rodriguez cartel. Ethan stood at the back with Max, who sat calmly, vest-secured, ears alert. Around them, seasoned officers exchanged skeptical glances. Peterson's stare burned across the room like a warning flare. Agent Marcus Williams pointed to the map. 3 locations. We need precise scent confirmation industrial zones with high contamination. No mistakes. Afterward, Williams pulled Ethan aside. Sullivan vouches for you. But can your soft approach handle this scale? Ethan met his eyes. Max stays calm when other dogs panic. That's our edge. They'll never see us coming. Later during training drills, Max showed why. While other dogs barked and charged, Max moved slowly, nose low, mind focused. He picked out chemical variations even veterans missed. Detective Reynolds, watching from the sidelines, whispered to Sullivan, "It's like he's solving a riddle, not hunting prey." But resistance remained. Peterson filed complaints. Equipment went missing during Ethan's drills. Updates conveniently arrived late. Someone was trying to push them out. One evening, Martinez found Ethan alone, watching surveillance footage, Max curled by his feet. "They're scared," she said, pulling up a chair. "Because you're changing everything they've ever believed." Ethan sighed, eyes tired. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong." "No," she said. "You belong. Just watch your back." She was right. 2 days later, Ethan discovered vital surveillance notes missing from his task force file. Max had memorized the scents, but the omission could have tanked the mission. Sullivan was livid. "This ends now," she said, slamming her fist on the briefing table. "Anyone sabotaging this operation will be suspended. I don't care if it's a senior officer." That night, Ethan sat with Max beneath the hum of the kennel lights, the familiar stillness grounding him. He pulled out his father's badge, running a thumb across the worn edges. "What would you think of this, Dad?" he whispered. Max pressed closer, warm and steady. They were being hunted now, not by criminals, but by fear, by pride, by men in uniform. But they wouldn't run. The final briefing came just before dawn. The warehouse loomed large on the screen, cold concrete and steel pulsing with cartel activity. Max sat motionless beside Ethan, his vest fitted with a new tactical camera. Martinez had delivered it herself. "Everyone chipped in," she'd said softly. "Even some of the old guard. You're changing more than you think." Outside, the city slept. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, eyes were sharp, hands ready. "Carter, Agent Williams," said you and Max take point. "Scent verification on the east perimeter. Confirm before entry." Ethan nodded. Max's ears twitched, but he was calm. They moved through the shadows with precision, hugging the warehouse's edges. Ethan scanned for surveillance, while Max sniffed, his posture steady. Then subtle shift. Max froze, body-angled nose lifting toward a faint glint in the upper window. Ethan followed his gaze. A reflection. "Scope," he whispered into the radio. "East side, upper level, possible counter-surveillance." Sullivan's voice crackled. "Fall back." And then the ambush began. Engines roared to life. Headlights flared. Gunfire erupted like thunder. Max pressed against Ethan, pushing him behind a crate just seconds before bullets ripped the air. Team Alpha scattered, returning fire, shouting positions. "It's a trap," Ethan called. They knew we were coming. But Max didn't panic. He waited, tense but focused, reading Ethan's breath, posture, silence. Together they moved, fluid, instinctive, like one mind in 2 bodies. Through the scope, Ethan saw them, men hauling crates into a black SUV. Vasquez, the cartel's phantom, was inside. Williams's voice barked through the radio. "We can't let them leave with that shipment. Carter, can you and Max buy us time?" Ethan looked at Max. No command needed. They moved, not like soldiers, like ghosts. Max entered the loading bay alone, posture casual, tail low, pretending to be a stray. The guards hesitated. He didn't look like a police dog, just curious, harmless. That hesitation was everything. While eyes turned to Max, Ethan circled wide, taking mental snapshots, layout, crates, guard count. He clicked the radio. 2 guards, SUV northeast corner. Crates being moved. Then Max froze. A subtle prickle ran down Ethan's spine. Max had only ever done this once before. "Something's wrong," Ethan whispered. "Max is picking up." The explosion ripped through the loading bay before he could finish. Smoke billowed from the blast site, turning the rising sun into a blood-colored smear. Inside the warehouse, alarms screamed and flames licked the air. Max didn't flinch. His training held. His bond held. "This was planned," Ethan muttered, as he pulled Max behind cover. "They're not just running, they're erasing everything." Captain Sullivan's voice crackled through the radio. "They're destroying the evidence. Proceed with caution." Ethan and Max swept through the wreckage while SWAT teams secured the perimeter. Paper ash fluttered around them like burnt snow. Max led with his nose, guiding Ethan through collapsed offices and scorched corridors. Behind a door barely hanging on its hinges, they found a wounded guard, frightened but alive. Max didn't growl. He approached with calm eyes and a gentle stance, laying down beside the man until help arrived. They pressed on. In the far corner beneath a heap of fallen shelving, Max stopped again. His head cocked. His stance said, "Here." Together they unearthed a hidden compartment. Inside, a scorched laptop, damaged but recoverable. Detective Reynolds arrived, her face pale with ash and fury. This was no last-minute panic. This was a precision burn. As they documented the scene, Max alerted again, this time to a filing cabinet untouched by flames. Inside, internal police documents, tactical team formations, briefing notes, photos, names, faces, including a picture of Ethan and Max in training. "They weren't just tipped off," Reynolds whispered. "They studied us. They knew who we'd send." Then footsteps. Peterson appeared in the doorway, face unreadable. "Just checking your progress," he said. Max immediately stepped between him and the evidence. Silent. Still. Guarding. After he left, Reynolds leaned in. "Did you hear what he asked about the K9 results? How did he know we'd found anything?" Ethan's stomach turned. They'd been betrayed. From the inside. That night, back at the K9 facility, Ethan sat with Max beneath the same humming lights they'd started under. Around them, the world had changed. Smoke still clung to his uniform. He pulled out his father's badge and held it up. "We're not just chasing criminals anymore, are we?" he whispered. Max didn't respond with a wag or a lick. He simply rested his head in Ethan's lap and stayed. In the days after the raid, the department wore a mask of calm, but beneath the surface, it boiled. Captain Sullivan launched a covert internal investigation. Only a few were trusted: Ethan, Max, Reynolds, Martinez. The laptop yielded encrypted messages, months of leaks between a department insider and the Rodriguez cartel. Dates, names, movements. Whoever the mole was, they sat high. Ethan and Max were assigned new patrols, but the real mission was silent observation, surveillance exposure. Max's calm demeanor was now a weapon, his ability to blend, to watch, without drawing suspicion. During one routine pass by Peterson's office, Max stiffened, just slightly. A twitch of the ears, a change in breath. Inside, through half-closed blinds, Ethan saw Peterson slip something to Chief Deputy Sanders. Moments later, Sanders launched an administrative review of the K9 unit. "They're trying to discredit you," Sullivan said, closing the blinds of her office. "If they break your credibility, your evidence means nothing." The attacks grew bolder. Security footage of Max's training sessions was accessed. Notes were altered. Martinez intercepted a suspicious transfer order reassigning Max to another district. "They're trying to separate you," she said. "You're strongest together. They know that." One night, while doing a secondary sweep near the evidence storage wing, Max alerted low, subtle insistent, Ethan followed him into the basement. They found a senior technician with no clearance accessing files from the warehouse case. He smiled politely. Just reviewing for archiving. Max didn't buy it. Reviewing security footage confirmed it. He'd been entering the vault at night for weeks. Reynolds uncovered more shredded documents, traces of industrial-grade chemical erasers, not standard issue. Someone was trying to erase history, not just one operation. Sullivan was grim. This runs deeper than we feared. Then came the final straw. Peterson's team, armed and tactical, approached the K9 facility late one night. Cameras showed standard breach formation, except this wasn't standard. Sanders had signed a falsified transfer. Sullivan was being bypassed. Martinez's warning arrived in a text. They're coming for Max. Stay safe. Ethan looked down at his partner. Max was already standing, calm, silent, ready. This is it, Ethan whispered. Stay close. Max didn't flinch. His posture didn't change. He simply waited. Together. At precisely 11:42 p.m., the facility's front doors shook under a breach command. Officer Carter Peterson's voice echoed. This is a direct order. Surrender your weapon and release the K9. Ethan pressed the record button on his department-issued device. Max sat beside him, steady, unwavering. He stepped into the corridor and raised his voice, clear, calm, controlled. Senior Handler Peterson, under whose authority is this action being taken? From the back, Sanders stepped forward, face stone hard. Mine. Sullivan's authority has been revoked. You've compromised sensitive operations. Ethan's heart beat slower. This wasn't about rules. It was about truth. Then, let's bring everything into the light, he said, stepping aside. Behind him, the surveillance feed broadcast to multiple secure terminals. Reynolds and Martinez were already watching. Evidence had been transmitted. The encrypted files, the laptop logs, the footage of Sanders and Peterson. They'd prepared for this moment. Max sat between the two groups, his stillness louder than any bark. Not a threat. A witness. Sullivan's voice came over the intercom. All tactical units, stand down immediately. Internal Affairs has assumed command. Orders validated. In that moment, the breach halted. The silence was profound. Peterson's expression cracked. Sanders turned to leave, but Martinez blocked the door with a warrant in hand. It was over. Later that night, as calm returned, Ethan sat in the training yard under the stars. Max rested beside him, eyes half closed, ears still alert. We did it, Ethan whispered. Not just the operation, not just the case, but everything. They'd proven something deeper, that loyalty wasn't forged through domination, but devotion. That a dog once labeled broken and a man deemed too soft could build something stronger than protocols, something unshakable. Max shifted closer, resting his head on Ethan's lap, just like he did that first night. And Ethan understood. They hadn't just changed the K9 unit. They'd redefined what it meant to serve, not with force, but with trust.